My name is Lila, and I am 18 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've known I wasn't quite like most of the girls around me. I grew up in a world where the expectation was simple: one day, you would meet a nice boy, fall in love, and everything would fall neatly into place. But deep down, my feelings were never that neat. I called myself bisexual when I was younger, queer, sometimes, because I didn't know how else to explain it. I knew I was drawn to women, that I noticed the way my best friend laughed, or how a stranger's smile could stop me in my tracks. But for some reason, life only ever brought me men. And the truth is, it left me feeling empty. My friends liked to joke that I was good with guys, because I always had someone texting me, always had a boy who wanted to take me out. But inside, I felt like I was constantly putting on a performance. I knew how to act like the girlfriend they wanted me to be, but I never felt like myself. The attention was flattering, sure, but it was also suffocating. I was smiling on the outside and restless on the inside, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. For 6 years I wore that label, bisexual, queer, but when people looked at my life, all they saw were men. And every time someone said, "Oh, you've only dated boys." Then how do you know, a small part of me shrank. How could I explain that it wasn't about what I had done, but about what I hadn't felt? That no matter how hard I tried, no man's touch, no man's words, no man's love ever reached the center of me. My last relationship was the clearest example of this. He wasn't a bad person. He was kind, dependable, and he tried to make me happy. Everyone thought we were the perfect match, high school sweethearts who stayed together, who could have gone on forever. But every night I went to bed with a knot in my chest, asking myself, is this it? Is this what love is supposed to feel like? Because if it was, I wanted no part of it. We would go out to dinner, laugh over shared jokes, kiss goodnight, and I would go home feeling nothing but exhaustion. He would talk about our future, about apartments and college and us, and my heart would sink because none of it felt real to me. It was like watching a movie where I was cast in the lead role, but didn't believe in the story. And the more I tried to convince myself it was right, the more wrong it felt. I remember one night in particular, we were sitting in his car, the windows fogged up from the cold. He reached across the console, brushed a strand of hair from my face, and whispered that he loved me. I looked at him, and I knew what I was supposed to say back. But inside, I felt like I was betraying both of us. I did say it, because I couldn't stand to hurt him, but the words tasted foreign, like they didn't belong to me. That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep pretending. Love, real love, wasn't supposed to feel like a lie. So I ended it. I wish I could say that breaking up gave me immediate relief, but it didn't. At first, it felt like stepping into a void. Everyone around me expected me to be heartbroken over losing such a good guy, but what they didn't see was that I wasn't mourning the relationship. I was mourning all the years I had lost to confusion, shame, and pretending. I wasn't grieving him. I was grieving me. For weeks, I walked around with that heaviness in my chest, wondering if maybe I was broken. I told myself maybe I just didn't know how to love, maybe there was something wrong with me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't broken. I was just searching for something I had never been given: authenticity. Connection. A spark that would make me feel alive instead of trapped. What I wanted was so simple, but it felt so impossible: to look into someone's eyes and feel like they saw me. To hold someone's hand and know that it was exactly where I wanted to be. To stop acting and start living. I didn't know if I would ever find it. At 18, everything felt uncertain. The only thing I knew for sure was this: whatever came next, it had to be real. I was done performing, done settling, done silencing the part of me that had been whispering for years. I was ready, scared, but ready, to finally listen. The night I ended things with him was quiet, almost painfully ordinary. We were sitting in his living room, a movie playing in the background, the kind of evening we'd shared 100 times before. But while he laughed at the screen, my chest felt like it was carrying a secret too heavy to keep inside any longer. I watched him, kind and oblivious, and the truth pressed harder against me. I couldn't keep doing this. "I need to tell you something," I finally said. My voice cracked a little, and his smile faded. It wasn't a dramatic breakup. There were no shouting matches, no slammed doors. Just the kind of raw honesty I had been avoiding for months. I told him I cared about him, but that I wasn't happy. That I hadn't been happy in a long time. That it wasn't his fault, but it also wasn't fixable. He tried to understand, asked questions, looked for some way to make it right, but the more he spoke, the more certain I became. No amount of kindness from him could fill the emptiness inside me. When I left that night, there was a strange silence in the air. I expected to cry, expected to feel crushed by guilt, but what I felt instead was release. A long exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time in years, I wasn't bound by pretending. Still, freedom didn't come without its own weight. Relief walked hand in hand with loneliness, and when I got home and lay in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what came next. In the days that followed, I felt like I was learning how to exist all over again. There was a new lightness in me. I could breathe. I could think about my future without dread, but there was also fear. Free but scared became the phrase I clung to whenever I tried to explain it. Free because I had finally let go of something that was never mine to hold. Scared because the path ahead was blank, and I had no idea where to step. That's when my friends stepped in. Most of my closest friends were queer women and non-binary people, the kind of people who carried their identities with pride and gentleness. They were the ones I had always admired, secretly wishing I could be as sure of myself as they seemed to be. When they heard about the breakup, they didn't pity me. They didn't tell me I'd made a mistake, or that I should have tried harder. Instead, they welcomed me with open arms, like I had finally stepped into a place I belonged. They took me out, late-night walks, coffee shop hangouts, afternoons spent sprawled across someone's living room floor, laughing until our cheeks hurt. They didn't let me stay stuck in my thoughts for too long. And when I confessed to them that part of the reason I ended things was because I finally understood, deep down, that I was a lesbian, they didn't blink. They smiled. They hugged me. One of them said, "We've been waiting for you to say that." It was the first time I'd said the word out loud about myself, lesbian. It felt sharp and soft at the same time, like a truth that had been hiding in my chest for years, finally seeing daylight. From then on, my friends made it their mission to help me rediscover myself. They encouraged me to meet new people, to stop shrinking into the background, to trust that I deserved connection just as much as anyone else. Sometimes they teased me, dropping names of single friends they thought I might like, nudging me toward the idea of possibility. Other times, they simply listened when I needed to talk about the confusion and shame that still lingered from my past. There were moments when the loneliness crept back in, late at night, especially, when the silence of my room felt overwhelming. But unlike before, I wasn't carrying it alone. I had people who reminded me that there was nothing broken about me. That what I wanted wasn't too much. That love, real love, was worth waiting for. For the first time in my life, I began to believe them. If there's one thing I will always be grateful for, it's the circle of people who surrounded me when I needed them most. My friends weren't just friends, they were a chosen family, stitched together out of late-night talks, shared secrets, and a deep understanding of what it means to be different. Most of them were queer women or non-binary people, and each one carried their identity like a banner, not in a loud way, but in a way that said, "This is who I am, and I am not ashamed." Being around them was like stepping into sunlight after years in the shade. They made it look so natural to embrace who they were. Whether it was in the way they dressed, the people they loved, or the conversations they had, there was no apology in them. And every time I watched them live so openly, something inside me shifted. I wanted that. I wanted to stop hiding behind uncertainty and finally breathe freely. Our little group would meet up everywhere: coffee shops with mismatched chairs, thrift stores where we'd try on clothes we couldn't afford just for fun, parks where we'd sprawl on the grass and watch the sky darken into night. They were chaotic, kind, messy, and full of life, and being with them made me feel more like myself than I ever had before. They were also relentless matchmakers. Not in the pushy, uncomfortable way, but in the kind of way that said, "We see you, we know what you deserve, and we think you should have it." After my breakup, it became their new favorite topic. They teased me gently, listing names of people I should accidentally run into, or suggesting that I just happen to show up at the same events. And there was one name that kept coming up, a girl they all seemed convinced I would like. I didn't know much about her. Only that she was also 18, queer, and somehow seemed to float in the same social circles as us without ever crossing paths with me. I'd seen her online, mutual follows on Instagram, occasional likes on each other's posts, but we had never spoken. From the way my friends described her, she sounded like the kind of person who made people feel at ease just by walking into a room. Confident, funny, kind. They insisted she and I would click instantly. The thought made me nervous in a way I couldn't explain. I'd never had anyone suggest a girl for me before. Boys, sure, plenty of times. But this was different. This was closer to the part of myself I had only just started to claim, and the idea of stepping into it made my heart race. Sometimes, late at night, I would scroll through her profile. Pictures of her laughing with friends, posing in sunlit fields, candid shots at concerts. She looked like she belonged everywhere she went, like the world was made a little brighter by her being in it. I wondered what it would feel like to be seen by someone like her. To have her attention, even for a moment. My friends, of course, noticed my curiosity. They teased me about it endlessly. "You're blushing," one of them said once when her name came up. "I am not," I protested, covering my face with my hands. They just laughed knowingly. "Don't worry. You'll meet her soon." As much as I rolled my eyes, part of me hoped they were right. Still, the thought of it terrified me. What if I wasn't what she was looking for? What if I messed it up? What if, after all my talk about finally wanting something real, I wasn't brave enough to reach for it? I carried those questions with me like a nervous secret. And yet, underneath the fear, there was something else too: curiosity. A quiet, persistent voice that whispered, "What if this time feels different? What if, for once, you don't have to pretend?" I didn't know then that the answer to those questions would come sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring, one of those days where the air felt heavy with sunlight, as if the whole world had decided to slow down just enough to be noticed. My friends had dragged me to a small park near the center of town, the kind with sprawling green lawns, a scattering of trees, and a little coffee cart that smelled like roasted beans and vanilla syrup. People lounged on picnic blankets, music drifted faintly from someone's speaker, and the air buzzed with the easy chatter of a weekend gathering. I hadn't known she would be there. The moment I saw her, my chest tightened. She was standing near the edge of the lawn with a small group of people I half recognized, her laughter floating above the hum of voices. She looked different in person, taller than I expected, brighter, like sunlight had chosen her as its favorite. Her hair caught the light when she moved, and for a second I felt like I was outside of my own body, watching the scene from somewhere far away. My friends noticed before I did. One of them leaned toward me and whispered, "That's her." My pulse quickened. I smoothed my shirt unnecessarily, tugged at the sleeves, anything to keep my hands from trembling. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what to say or how to act. The idea of meeting her had lived in my imagination for weeks, but I hadn't expected reality to show up so suddenly. I tried to act casual, sipping my iced coffee and laughing at a joke I didn't hear, but my eyes betrayed me. They kept drifting back to her, catching glimpses of her smile, the tilt of her head, as she listened to someone speak. Every time, I forced myself to look away before she noticed. At least, I thought I did. And then, before I could steady myself, she was walking toward me. I felt my breath hitch. She wasn't hesitant, there was an ease in her stride, a confidence I could only dream of carrying. She looked right at me, her eyes warm, curious, like we weren't strangers at all. "Hey," she said, her voice light and friendly. "I love your outfit." For a second, my brain forgot how to function. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I managed a small, awkward smile. "Oh, thank you." She tilted her head slightly, studying me in a way that made me feel both exposed and seen. "And those sunglasses," she added, pointing toward where they rested on the top of my head. "Can I see them?" I blinked. "My sunglasses?" "Yeah," she said, grinning. "They look cool. Try them on for me." The request was so unexpected, so playful, that I froze. Then, bashfully, I slid the glasses down over my eyes. The world dimmed, but when I looked up at her through the tinted lenses, it was as if she was the only thing in focus. Her lips curved into a smile, slow and deliberate, and I swear my heart forgot how to beat. "You look great," she said softly. The words sank into me like sunlight after rain. I'd been complimented before, plenty of times, by plenty of people, but never like this. Never in a way that made me feel like I was glowing from the inside out. Butterflies erupted in my stomach, fluttering so wildly I thought they might lift me off the ground. I laughed, nervous and breathless, tugging the sunglasses back onto the top of my head. "They are just sunglasses. Not when you wear them," she teased, her eyes sparkling. My friends, of course, were watching from nearby, pretending not to stare, but failing miserably. I could feel their excitement radiating toward me, as if they were silently cheering from the sidelines. But in that moment, the world had narrowed to just the two of us, the grass beneath our feet, the sun warming my shoulders, and her gaze holding mine steady even when I wanted to look away. We talked for a few minutes, though I barely remember what was said. Something about music, something about summer plans. I was too distracted by the rhythm of her voice, the way her laugh bubbled easily, the way her eyes lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. Every second felt magnified, like I was living in a scene I didn't want to end. And then, just as quickly as it began, it was over. Her friends called her back, and she gave me one last smile before turning away. I stood frozen, sunglasses still perched crookedly on my head, trying to steady the racing of my heart. My friends swooped in immediately, teasing me, nudging me, asking what she had said. I barely answered. My mind was replaying the moment again and again, the way she looked at me, the way she said, "You look great." It was such a small thing, really. Just a few words, a few minutes, a pair of sunglasses exchanged in a sunlit park. But to me, it felt like a door had opened, one I hadn't even realized was locked. I had never felt butterflies like that before, never felt joy that made me want to laugh for no reason, never felt so undeniably alive. That night, lying in bed, I closed my eyes and replayed it all over again. The sound of her voice. The curve of her smile. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at me. It was as if a spark had caught fire in a part of me I thought had gone numb. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if I would see her again, or if she even thought twice about me after she walked away. But it didn't matter. What mattered was how I felt, light, giddy, overflowing with a joy I had never known before. Sometimes the smallest moments can change everything. And for me, that afternoon in the park, wearing my own sunglasses through her eyes, was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. When I left the park that evening, it felt like I was walking through a dream. My friends were laughing beside me, carrying on about where we should go for dinner, but their voices floated in the background like distant music. My mind was still trapped in those few minutes, her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at me through the sunlight. I kept touching the sunglasses on my head, as if they were proof that the moment had really happened. It was ridiculous, I knew, but it was the first time an object I'd owned felt charged with meaning, like a tiny piece of her lingered there. That night, I opened my journal, the same one I had been writing in since the breakup. The pages were filled with entries about confusion, doubt, and endless questions about who I was and what I wanted. But when I picked up my pen that night, the words spilled out like water breaking through a dam. "I can't stop smiling," I wrote. She looked at me like I was worth seeing. And for the first time in my life, I actually believed it. I paused, staring at the sentence. My hand was trembling. I read the words again and again, until my chest ached with something between joy and grief. How could such a tiny moment, 5 minutes at most, feel more alive than all the years I had spent in relationships with men? It wasn't just about attraction, though that was undeniable. It was about recognition. When she looked at me, I felt like I was no longer pretending. No rehearsed smiles, no hollow conversations, no invisible weight pressing me down. Just me, as I was, seen and accepted. The next day, I told my friends about it in more detail. We were sitting in a coffee shop, the smell of cinnamon and espresso thick in the air. I recounted every part of the conversation, probably too many times, and they laughed at how giddy I sounded. "You're glowing," one of them said, smirking over their latte. "I am not," I insisted, though I could feel the warmth in my cheeks. "You are," another chimed in. "And honestly, I've never seen you like this." Their words hit me harder than I expected. They were right. I had never felt like this before. Not when a boy told me I was beautiful, not when someone held my hand, not even when my ex whispered he loved me. Back then, everything felt muted, like the volume was turned down on my own life. But this was color, sound, light all flooding in at once. Later that evening, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, comparing the two versions of myself, the one who had spent years with men, and the one who had laughed nervously in the sunlight with her. With men, it had always been effort. Effort to respond in the right way, to smile at the right time, to convince myself I felt something when I didn't. With her, it was effortless. She spoke, I laughed. She smiled, I blushed. No script, no wait, no pretending. Just a spark that lit up everything inside me. For the first time, I wasn't scared of the word I'd been avoiding. Lesbian. I whispered it to myself in the quiet of my room, testing its edges. It didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like home. I realized then that my entire life, I had been chasing an idea of love that never belonged to me. I thought I was broken because I didn't feel what everyone else seemed to feel in their straight relationships. But I wasn't broken. I was just looking in the wrong direction. And now, with one simple encounter, I had finally caught a glimpse of what it could be like when it was right. The contrast was almost painful to acknowledge. All those years of emptiness, of confusion, of asking myself why nothing ever felt enough. And then this, 5 minutes of sunlight and laughter and a pair of sunglasses, teaching me more about myself than years of experience ever had. It wasn't about her specifically, though she was the catalyst. It was about me finally feeling alive in my own skin, about my heart recognizing what it had been longing for all along. I held onto that realization like a lifeline. Whenever doubt crept back in, whenever the voice whispered, "Maybe you're imagining it, maybe it doesn't mean anything," I reminded myself of the butterflies, the giddiness, the way my whole body felt like it was humming with joy. That wasn't imagination. That was truth. For the first time in my life, I began to believe I could have the kind of love I had always dreamed of, not a performance, not an obligation, but something real, something that would set me free instead of tying me down. And it all began with her. The days after that first encounter felt like waiting for the next page of a story I didn't want to end. I wasn't sure when I'd see her again, but my friends, knowing me far too well, assured me it would happen soon. And it did. The next time was at a small gathering at one of our mutual friends' apartments. Nothing fancy, just a handful of us sprawled on mismatched couches, sipping sodas and arguing over which movie to watch. I was mid-sentence, explaining why my pick was clearly superior, when she walked in. My heart betrayed me instantly, stumbling over itself like it had forgotten how to beat properly. She smiled when she saw me. Just a simple curve of her lips, a casual "Hey, good to see you again," but it carried the weight of an earthquake inside me. I smiled back, tried to sound calm, but the rest of the night I found myself cataloguing every little detail about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed, how she leaned forward when she listened, how her voice seemed to warm the room. These weren't grand gestures, nothing dramatic. But to me, each was a spark, igniting something deeper. Over the next few weeks, our paths crossed more often, through the overlapping webs of friends, hangouts, study sessions, and coffee runs. Sometimes it was just a quick hello, sometimes a short chat, but each time left me walking away lighter than I'd arrived. One afternoon, we ended up side by side in a coffee shop line. She noticed the book in my hand and asked about it, her eyes lighting up as I explained the story. It wasn't a long conversation, maybe 3 minutes at most, but I replayed it for hours afterward, marveling at how something so ordinary could feel so extraordinary. It became a pattern. A smile across the room at a party. A brief touch on my arm when she said goodbye. A shared laugh at some silly joke no one else seemed to hear. They were small things, easily overlooked by anyone else. But for me, each was a revelation. I had never been taught to value these kinds of moments. Growing up, love was portrayed as grand gestures, bouquets of flowers, dramatic confessions, kisses in the rain. And maybe those things had their place. But here, in the quiet exchanges with her, I discovered that love, real love, often blooms in the tiniest spaces. What astonished me most was how much meaning I could draw from what the world might call nothing. A look. A laugh. The way she said my name. It was as though my whole life I'd been thirsty without knowing it, and now even the smallest sip felt like water. I began to see how queer first experiences are often minimized or dismissed, how society overlooks them because they don't fit the usual scripts. Straight crushes, straight first kisses, straight relationships, those are celebrated openly, plastered across stories and movies. But for me, these seemingly small, queer moments carried the weight of transformation. It wasn't just about liking someone. It was about stepping into myself. Each tiny interaction with her whispered, "You're not wrong for feeling this. You're not broken. This is who you are." Sometimes, after seeing her, I would go home and cry, not out of sadness, but out of sheer overwhelm. It was like discovering a whole new color, in a world I thought I'd already mapped. The intensity frightened me, but it also set me free. I learned to stop questioning whether the moments mattered. They did. Because they mattered to me. And isn't that what makes something important? There's one memory that stays with me the most. We were all at the park again, a casual hangout. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink. She sat next to me on the grass, close enough that our shoulders brushed. We didn't even say much, just listened as our friends argued about where to get dinner. But the warmth of her shoulder against mine, it felt like a whole universe in that single point of contact. Later, walking home, I realized I'd spent years chasing the wrong kind of love, the kind that felt heavy, obligatory, distant. But here, in the quiet closeness of her presence, I had found something real. The impact of these moments wasn't in their size. It was in their honesty. No pretending, no performance, just the raw, simple truth of connection. And for me, that was everything. For so long, I had carried a version of myself that wasn't complete. I wore masks, polite smiles at family gatherings, half-truths in conversations with co-workers, vague answers when people asked about relationships. It was easier that way, I thought. Safer. But after meeting her, and after being surrounded by my queer friends who lived with such openness, I began to question why I still held myself back. Confidence doesn't arrive overnight, it builds quietly, like a soft tide reshaping the shore. At first, it showed up in tiny choices. Correcting someone gently when they assumed I was straight. Using the word lesbian out loud in front of people, even when it made my voice tremble. Letting myself laugh freely at jokes that only queer folks would understand. Each act felt like planting a small flag on the map of who I really was. What surprised me most was how much support I found once I allowed myself to be visible. My friends cheered me on, not in a loud, performative way, but with simple affirmations. We see you. We are proud of you. Their words landed like healing salve over years of quiet wounds I had carried. For the first time, I felt part of something bigger than myself, a community that understood me without needing endless explanations. And in that belonging, I found courage. It wasn't just about declaring my identity. It was about embodying it. Walking into a room without shrinking. Holding my head a little higher when someone asked about my life. Choosing clothes that felt authentic, not ones I thought would please other people. Even the way I carried myself shifted, like my body had finally gotten permission to exhale after years of holding its breath. I also began to notice how this newfound confidence changed the way I imagined love. Before, my vision of romance had always been narrow, shaped by what I thought was expected: boy meets girl, they date, maybe marry, live a respectable life. That script had never fit me, but I had never dared to dream beyond it. Now, though, the possibilities felt endless. I let myself picture futures I had once pushed aside, the joy of walking hand in hand with a woman without fear, building a home together, waking up next to someone who made me feel alive. They weren't fantasies anymore. They were options. Real ones. Most importantly, I stopped shaming myself for wanting them. When I looked back at the shy, uncertain person I had been just months earlier, I barely recognized her. Not because she was weak, she had survived, and that was strength, but because she hadn't yet known the fullness of her own heart. Now, each day felt like I was stepping closer to that fullness. And yes, she, the girl who had started all this, was at the center of many of those imaginings. But it wasn't just about her. It was about me finally believing I was worthy of the kind of love I had always secretly craved. Confidence, I realized, isn't about being fearless. It's about being honest. And in that honesty, I found a kind of power I never thought I could hold. I don't know what will come next. Maybe she and I will grow closer, maybe we won't. Maybe this connection was meant to be just a spark, a reminder of something I had buried for too long. But the truth is, I no longer feel the need to demand certainty from the future. What matters is what I feel right now, the way one laugh, one smile, one pair of sunglasses slipped into my hands could unravel years of silence inside me. For so long I thought love had to be grand, dramatic, undeniable to be real. But I've learned that sometimes, the smallest interactions, the ones that would look ordinary to anyone else, can shift the entire direction of a life. For me, this wasn't just about meeting a girl. It was about meeting myself. The self who no longer hides, who no longer accepts emptiness just to avoid loneliness. The self who allows her heart to flutter without shame, who sees beauty in every quiet moment of connection. I don't know if she'll ever hold my hand, or if we'll ever share the kind of story that turns into something lasting. But even if we don't, she has already given me a gift I can't repay. She reminded me that I am capable of feeling, deeply, fully, joyfully. And that, more than anything, makes me believe in love again. This is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning.